Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Love Rising podcast. We are here with the Peaceful Mamas today, Lindsay Ambrose and Natalie Sager. And we're going to be talking about mindful motherhood. We're so excited about this kind of motherhood theme because it definitely kind of goes a little bit off of our normal conversation, but it's also so applicable to, women and women of our kind of demographic. So here's a quick bio of each of these ladies. Lindsay Ambrose, everyday mom, everyday every mom founder. Lindsay specializes in mindfulness, self-compassion, and conscious living and parenting on her blog and podcast, Every Day, Every Mom. Through workshops, one-on-one, and group work, she guides parents into being more mindful, present, intentional, and purposeful. Parenting young children is a challenging and beautiful opportunity to awaken the more centered, compassionate, and joyful self that is within all of us, waiting to blossom. And Lindsay, why don't you say a few words so people know who's who, so we can hear your voices.
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is Lindsay. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Clara.
Thank you. And then we have Natalie Sager, aka Modern Hippie Mama, is a mama of two delicious boys, wife to her best friend, journeyman and soulmate, and daughter to two incredibly supportive and caring parents. As an author, speaker, teacher, and meditative yogini, she is passionate about holistic health, organic living, and honoring the divine. Her mission is to help all beings live in pure health with an abundance of happiness. Beautiful. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Okay, cool. So hopefully you guys can differentiate a little bit between those voices. I got connected to these women because I actually got a chance to read their book, Peaceful Mama, The Mind, Body, Baby Connection. And it's great. It's a really good kind of practical guidebook to being more conscious throughout pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, and then into motherhood. And it was just a lovely read. And if you guys are interested in checking that out, you can find it on Amazon. And of course, we'll link to it in the show notes. And if you want to join the tribe and, get to know Lindsay and Natalie and follow their stuff, the website is peacefulmama.com. So we always like to start out these podcasts by hearing just, how did you get here? What's your story? And that can be as short or as long as you want it to be, but let's start with Natalie and then.
Perfect.
Okay.
Are you able to hear me? I think I lost you for just a second.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I'm able to hear you. We just asked, what's your story?
Okay.
How'd you get here?
Great. So I'll go first. So I have a very long story that just keeps getting longer and longer as the days go by. But in brief, my story is that I have a passion for movement, for healing, and for trying to remove any barriers and blockages in my life so that I'm able to be more heart-centered and find more peace within my existence as a human. And this journey started when I was very, very young, because that's when I started to incorporate movement into my everyday. So I danced for many, many years. And fast forward to when I was thinking about becoming pregnant. At that point in my life, I was taking acid reflux medicine, and I had a very severe case of what's called GERD. It's gastroesophageal reflux disease. And it had progressed to a point where they gave it a name called Barrett's esophagus. And I feel like any diagnosis or issue is just given a name, and we can attach meaning to that and fear to that, or we can just look at it as it is. And so in my case, when they told me that, my acid reflux had progressed to Barrett's esophagus, which is a precancerous issue, of course, I was filled with fear. And I had a procedure done where they did like an ablation and burned off some of whatever was not necessary. But in looking back at that, at the person that I am today, I wonder if I would still have taken that same route of that procedure. And most likely I would not have, but I did. And as a result of that, I continued to take medication. But when I was thinking about becoming pregnant with Jonah, I remember thinking that I didn't want to be on medication anymore. And so I started thinking about that preconception point for a while, and I felt like it was necessary for me to quote unquote clean up my body before I was welcoming new life inside of me. And so one of the things that I did was get off of birth control, which had been part of my habits, I guess, for quite some time. And so I knew in my heart that I wanted to be off of birth control for at least a year before we even considered trying. And so I did. And I was grateful that I was no longer taking synthetic hormones and that I was allowing my body to become more in sync with nature and with circadian rhythm and just becoming more whole as opposed to kind of taking something to make me less harmonious in my own body. And then when I was pregnant, I knew that one of the side effects of pregnancy could potentially be acid reflux. And because that was something that I had been dealing with for many years at that point, I thought that the best thing for me to do was stay on my medication. And again, looking back, I probably wouldn't have made that decision, but we do what we do when we know it. And then once we have more information, sometimes those decisions change. So when I was pregnant, I went to this prenatal masseuse, and who later ended up becoming my doula for my second pregnancy. But she had mentioned to me that she just read this article about the effects of gluten on acid reflux. And I thought it was very interesting because for many, many years, I had been told by specialists and doctors and anyone that I had seen that I should be removing acid producing foods. So like tomatoes, tomato sauce, spicy foods, chocolate, coffee, citrus-based foods, et cetera, et cetera. But I had never been told about gluten. And so I was like, well, this is interesting. I guess I'll give it a go. And so what we did was I came home and I told my husband we're going to go gluten-free. And he was like, okay. And so we ate everything in the house that had gluten in it, and anything that we brought into the house, so anything we were buying no longer had gluten. And so when we removed the gluten from our diets, we started to notice some pretty big shifts in our digestive health, both of us. And so by the time Jonah was born, I was completely gluten-free and I was off all my medication and I was feeling really good. But my son, Jonah, was crying nonstop to the point where I thought I was literally going to lose my mind. And we were bouncing on a stability ball to try to get him to quiet down and to just give him some rest from screaming all the time. And then fast forward, I spoke to a lactation consultant who suggested that I remove dairy. She said, did you cut out gluten? I said, I did. I'm gluten-free. She said, the next thing to go is dairy. And for me, that was not an easy task. And it wasn't something that I really wanted to believe because I love cheese and I love dairy. And I just couldn't imagine not having those two things in my life, to the point where my husband had actually proposed to me in a gigantic block of cheddar cheese, just to give you an idea of how much I love cheese. But when your baby is screaming and crying and you are slowly losing your mind, you'll do anything that could potentially save both of you. And so I removed the dairy, and after a few weeks, I had a brand new child. He still cried. He was still a baby, but he wasn't that same infant who was inconsolable. And so I started to really think about this whole connection between food and how our bodies react to it. And I went down this rabbit hole of, diving into food and everything that could potentially affect how I was being based on my food. And then I realized that everything is not about just the food, and it's not just about the movement piece, which I talked about earlier, how exercise and moving and dancing has been a huge part of my life because it makes me feel closer and connected to my soul and my spirit. And so I started studying with the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and got my holistic health certification and learned more about what holistic health actually means, which is looking at yourself as a whole as opposed to your respective parts. And so incorporating not only, healthy food options and moving the body, but tapping into your creativity, starting to learn more about what your spirituality is, what your finances are like, what the relationships are like in your body. All of these different aspects contribute to you as a person and your holistic health. And along that journey, I was very blessed to meet Lindsay, my co-author, at a conference in Chicago where we were partners and we were chatting, and discovered that we had very similar belief systems and very similar values in regards to who it is we wanted to be as people, in addition to how it was that we wanted to parent our children. And we decided after Lindsay had interviewed me for a podcast that we wanted to do something together and collaborate. And so over the course of 2 years over the phone, with Lindsay being in Chicago and myself being in Florida, we wrote our book, Peaceful Mama, The Mind, Body, and Baby Connection, which is a manifesto of conscious motherhood. And so making that long story just a tiny bit shorter, that's where I am today.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I feel like this is a story that we hear a lot, and it's definitely my own story as well, is that it starts with food, starts with awareness on the physical level, and then, you know, there's some other awareness like already, but it's like it starts with food, and then it kind of progresses into these other deeper, more subtle bodies, right? This awareness that we have, and like the growth and the healing and all of that. So it's, yeah, I like that. I like that it was that, you know, that progression. We see that a lot.
Yeah.
How about you, Lindsay?
Okay. I agree with you too about just awareness being like the first step. So that's really exciting that you share so much about that here. But a little more about me is I when I kind of became a mom, I found it to be, you know, really challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. I think that was one of my first experiences. Like, wow, this is amazing, but it's also the hardest thing I've ever done. So I started to think, I started on this path when so many women would tell me, people with older children would say, wow, it goes by so fast, enjoy it, you know, like these are the moments. And I thought, well, how do we do that? You know, like I'd love to really like be in the moment and more present. So that kind of started me like learning a little bit about mindfulness. And as I explored that more, and just the idea of like practicing how to be more aware, how to be more present, how to, you know, look at what's going right instead of what's going wrong, and kind of like learning a little bit about that, and how through breath and a meditation practice, how as I started to do those practices, I found parenting to be much more enjoyable. I found I was more present. So after I had my second child, I started to stay home with my kids instead of working. And I kind of felt like the desire to do something else. So that's when I started my blog, Every Day, Every Mom, not really knowing what it all was going to be. But I felt like I needed to share kind of, I was enjoying motherhood, and I was, you know, as I practiced this more and was caring for myself, I could really be there for my kids and be getting like the most out of this motherhood journey. And I was actually felt like I was really growing myself. And so I wanted to share that, and also like learn from other moms, like what they were doing, what was working. So that's what led to the podcast as well, where I started interviewing moms and had them share what I called life recipes. So little things that they were doing that were helping making their day-to-day better. And I also shared a lot about mindfulness and more conscious parenting, because I found the more present we were, the easier it was to parent, because that's kind of at the level where our kids are at. They're so present. They're finding the joy, and too often we miss that. And so I was sharing a little bit about that. And yeah, that led me to attend a conference that Natalie just talked about. I met Natalie, interviewed her for my podcast, and we just felt so in alignment that we felt like we had to do something, and that led to the book. And yeah, now here we are, kind of excited to be here talking about it and sharing a little bit more about how, you know, caring for ourselves and doing these practices, how we can just like show up, not just in our parenting, but as people in our relationships. You know, it's kind of all flows together. So that's where we are.
Awesome. Thank you. I wanted to start out with a question, just, you know, like, what is the mind, body, baby connection? And I guess most importantly, like, how does it vary, or how does it differ from the kind of typical parenting style, or the typical way that we raise our kids in this country?
I think in the most simplistic terms, we could view it that traditionally in our culture, we have a tendency to look outside of ourselves to find the answers. When the reality is, when we're looking within is when we can find exactly what it is that we need. So the same is applied to our parenting. There is such a strong bond between a parent and a child, a mother and a son, a mother and a daughter, whatever it is. And when you're growing a human being inside of you, it's not just a physical thing that's happening. There is so much more. Everything that the mother is thinking, feeling, and experiencing, the baby absorbs that. And there's this biological effect that happens based on what we think, feel, experience, and explore. And so
is this like, I mean, I totally believe it, but is it like science? Like, do you see this in the science? Like, okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am not like a scientific kind of girl. I'm very much into the woo-woo, but I'm just very grateful that there are people that can prove this scientifically, because then it just backs everything up. And we do have quite a bit of resources in our book that verify and validate all of that. Lindsay, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to add kind of the idea of like doing versus being. So much of what like our day to day is about doing, like do this, and that has worked. But in parenting, it's more about our being, like our presence. It's kind of how we feel, and that's why I think there's like so many different parenting books, and there's so many different techniques for sleeping, and there's so many different, even if you look outside of parenting, it's just there's different techniques for everything, because the way we're all different. So I found that I was really just stressing myself out when I was trying to look outside for all these answers and read all the different books, because in that moment, really what my child needed was just me, my presence, my being, and he needed love. And that's the biggest thing. And when we can show up with love, we can figure out a solution. We can tap into our own well of resources and know what we need. But it's really easy to get caught up in all the doing, like I should do this, and then you're not really there, you're not present, and that's what our children need more than anything.
Yeah, I think that's it's so true. But I guess I can't help but wonder, for people who are so used to doing, or going kind of external for validation or for insight and things like that, how do you kind of flip the switch as you become a mother? You become a mom. A lot of people are going to say, where do I find the time to spend time to be present with myself so that I can be present with my kids, or set aside time to get quiet, or things like that? Is that a question you guys get often?
It's not necessarily setting aside time, because when we frame it in that way, then we're almost adding extra work to just being. Like Lindsay said, that's adding to your to-do list instead of taking away from the to-dos and adding to just being. So it doesn't require any extra work. All it requires is simply bringing that awareness and mindfulness into your everyday life. And that, yes, you can learn that from other people, and it's important that you bring up that topic, because we do learn from other people and from other people's experiences, but what we take away is our choosing, and what we learn from our own experiences impact us much more than that of other people's experiences. So then the question comes back to, how do we bring awareness into our everyday so that we're able to be more present and not feel like it's an extra task that we have to do, and instead it answers Lindsay's question from before, which is, how do we enjoy the time that we have, because it is so fleeting, it goes by so quickly. And that can be something as simple as just bringing yourself back to your breath. And as a yoga teacher and a mindfulness teacher and blah, 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 I'm constantly talking about that, because it is that simple and it is that easy. All you have to do is, whatever you're doing in whatever moment, you just pause for a moment, count your inhale. How long does it take you to inhale? Hold your breath. How long can you hold your breath? Count your exhale. How long does it take you to exhale? And then hold the breath out in that space of non-breath. And simply by doing that exercise, which could take you, I don't know, 60 seconds of your day, all of a sudden, the only thing that you're thinking about is your breath. And that right there is mindfulness. That right there is bringing awareness to your breath. It slows down all the other thoughts that are taking you into the future, or all the thoughts that are holding you back in shackles because you're thinking about the past. Neither one of those are real. What's real is the moment that we're in together right now in this moment. And so the more times that you're able to bring yourself back to the present, the more joy you can find in just being. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I was just going to add too that one of the things we talk about in the book actually is kind of a framework that we call mama moments, like knowing we don't have those big chunks of time anymore. Like, and really none of us do, even parents or not. It's hard to find, like, make that time. And so we share a few different techniques as to how, we call it the mama moments, which is basically taking moments throughout our day, just in moments, you know, like, while you're doing the dishes, kind of mindfully doing them, and, you know, bringing that awareness into that moment. But what it's called, like, take a deep breath, like mom, and it's mindfulness, affirmation, movement, abundance, health, and heart. So by doing those little, practices, it leads to more like abundant, more wholehearted living. And because I think you're right, like, it's just too hard to try to make time, and it can even stress us out when we're like, I need to make time for meditating. And but we talk about just really simple ways, and even just, I find like one of the biggest one is just like starting a 5-minute practice of just being quiet. First thing when you wake up or before you go to bed, because the most like amazing thing I found is it's not that 5 minutes of quiet. It's kind of like that time that you gave, just those 5 minutes of just quieting your mind. Suddenly later in the day, you're able to become centered, and you're be able to like get present faster, because suddenly like your energy shifts a little bit when you just, in even a minute, or like Natalie said, just a little bit of breathing, it can kind of just get you back to present, get you back centered, so you can, choose your response, create a little space between what's going on around you and how you're responding. Because my biggest thing too, it's like, not so much, we don't have control what's going on around us all the time, but we can choose how we respond. And it just kind of, with our practice of being more mindful, we can choose to respond in a more loving, kind way.
Yeah, that's so good. I always say, basically, like, the space between the stimulants and the response is freedom.
Yeah.
And like, that is so true, like on so many different levels. And I can't imagine how important that is for parenting, because I've got a niece and a nephew, and for sure, if you can have a little bit of space in there, when you're like all activated, then that will just result in much easier flow of, communication and getting things done. And I think that's also I thought that was great when Natalie, you were talking about, how it's not really about setting aside time. And I've actually found that when I do when I do the necessary self-care, which doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of time, it's almost like when I'm more busy, I get more grounded, which is the opposite of what we normally think of. But it's because when you really are kind of like connected in to that center of who you are, it's almost like there's more traction. There's more weight in the back of your pickup truck, so to speak, to stay grounded when things are going really crazy around you. I don't know if that makes sense. It's actually kind of a new concept I haven't really talked about. But I do think that, like, it's almost like the more, especially if the things you're busy with are what you want to do, like what you want to be doing, right? So like, if you're really aligned with it, which parenting, hopefully you really want to be doing that, then it's almost like the busyness and the chaos is the bumper plates to bring you back into that center. And so we absolutely don't have to have a lot of time to be grounded and be present. It's almost like you can use the busyness to ground yourself. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does.
Yeah, and I kind of love the idea of, somebody shared this with me, but instead of just like doing the dishes to get to the next task, especially when you're busy, just doing this task to be in this task, like being in, whether it's bringing the kids to daycare or cleaning the kids up after dinner, or, anything this can really apply to. But instead of just like surviving through the days to get to the next moment, kind of bringing yourself into being here to be here and to be present and to enjoy it. And almost sometimes maybe asking yourself, where can I find joy in this moment? And maybe it's just the simplicity of, if it's been crazy and you're cleaning up the kids after dinner, it's just the simple joy of, we're all home. Like, it's been a little crazy, but we're all home and we're all together. And there's joy in that.
Yeah.
So
one of Lindsay's favorite things to say, which I love also, is she says, how can we make this more fun? So whatever situation you're in, even if it is just doing the dishes, how can you make it more fun? And then just that can help to flip the switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the more, I think it's cool too, because the more, like, while we're talking about it in the lens of parenting here, it really, like, it's for all areas of our life. It's in the relationships with, our partners and at our work, and it's like whatever it is, it's like when you can kind of have that perspective shift and find what's going right instead of focusing on what's wrong, and also like just simple things like, yeah, how can we make this fun? Or it really helps, and with kids especially, like when you can just give them like a few moments of like your actual full attention without thinking about other things, that's all they need sometimes. And then suddenly then they'll go off and do their own thing, and they won't keep bothered. They'll be, so it's just funny how, like, that's why we talk about, like, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So whatever, the moments you have when you can be really fully present there, it can be the same as like a long day of just not fully being there.
I found something else really helpful that I've been trying to practice myself, and it's when this tends to happen when I'm driving. Both kids are in the back. It's very distracting when they're talking and asking questions, and I want to be able to talk to them and answer their questions, but at the same time, the priority when I'm driving is keeping everybody safe. And so what I've been saying lately, whether I'm driving or if I'm on my phone for a moment checking something, and they're trying to talk to me, I'll just turn to them and say, you deserve my able to do right now. So let me finish what I'm doing, because driving needs my full attention. Or, the person that I'm getting back to on the phone needs my full attention. And when I'm done with them, then you get my full attention. And that's what you deserve.
I love that, because it's so amazing how, like, you can tell how a child is parented by their behavior. And I mean, my sister and brother-in-law are amazing parents. They're so patient. And my mom will even say, I just am so inspired by their parenting, because they slow down to explain something instead of just maybe, I'm busy and yep, okay. It's something like that where it's, I really want to be present with you right now. Just give me a moment. Let me finish this, and then I'll be present with you. And that can expand into so many areas of parenting. But it is so wonderful when you see a parent just be really present and respect their child's time, I guess, and questions. Because of course, kind of as you said, like asking questions, that's what toddlers and kids do, right? They ask you a million questions, and every parent that you talk to is like, it is so hard not to say, because I said so. And so like actually paying full attention and actually explaining to them, that just like brings a completely different child into life, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty amazing too, because I think it's a bit of like a generational shift. I always love, like, that sometimes it's a bit of a challenge when we're maybe with like elderly or with our family members that didn't parent that way, or they weren't children in environments that were like that. But being able to kind of keep up and do what feels true to you is just, it's hard, but it means a lot. And I think for me, the biggest shift is seeing like my child not as like, I'm not like their superior, like they're teaching me just as much as I'm teaching them. And when you kind of can see it that way and see like that they're teaching me to grow in ways that like, you know, that I need to grow, like parts of me are coming up in my experiences with them that are calling me to kind of grow and like move through some things that I've been holding on to that are ready to be, you know, let go and be healed. So that's been really helpful to me to just see this whole experience as, you know, they're like my little mirrors, like reflecting back to me, like what do I need to heal? What do I need to grow? And yeah, it can really be an amazing, you know, experience when we look at it that way and see our children that way. Even though they can be a challenge, they're like, but you know, it's amazing when we can say, wow, what am my biggest thing is changing the perspective of like, why me, or why does this happen? Why am I always what am I meant to learn through this? Or what am I supposed to learn here? And seeing whatever's coming up as that, as like a way, okay, what am I supposed to grow here?
So what would you guys say is like something when you're out at a restaurant, or you're in like, you know, some situation where there's parents and kids around and you're observing them with the knowledge that you have and the perspectives that you have, like what are some really common mistakes people are making as far as like from your perspective?
That is a very interesting question. And I would like to preface it with, I am by no stretch of the imagination an expert in parenting. I do not think that I know everything. In fact, I'm pretty sure I don't know anything. But with that being said, what I sometimes see is parents are parenting through fear instead of parenting through love. And I'm guilty of it myself. There are many times that I catch myself. I think the basic difference is that I do have that awareness and mindfulness, so that when I have made a choice that I'm like, I probably shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have reacted that way, whatever it is, I have that awareness to at least bring me back and allow me to shift whatever it is I say next. So what I mean by parenting out of fear versus parenting out of love is, if Jonah is riding his bike, he's got his helmet on, he's about to cross the street, and I'm shouting to him, freeze. Don't cross the street until I get there. He's 6 years old. He knows how to cross the street. He's looking right to left. But I'm still terrified that, God forbid, he doesn't see the car, you know, the rest of that story. And so I have to ask myself the question, am I telling him to freeze and wait for me because I'm afraid of what might happen next? That's parenting out of fear. Or am I able to just trust and parent out of love, knowing that he is going to look both ways? And I don't have the answer to that question. I can only ask it, witness it, and try to change it in myself so that I'm able to parent more out of love and less out of fear.
Yeah,
Great.
I think that's great, Natalie. And I would say, you know, the same thing. Like it, you know, I think the biggest, you know, the hardest thing that I learned in parenting, and I think many of us struggle with this, is I think for me it was like worrying more about what others thought instead of just being tuned into what I need and what my child needs in that moment. Sometimes, like, you know, the kids, they're so present and so real, so their emotions are so big, and they don't understand that it's not appropriate to be feeling that huge emotion in this quiet restaurant right now. So I think it's like, okay, like, so instead of like feeling guilt and shame, which is like sometimes like my natural maybe reaction, it's kind of like, okay, take a moment and do what we need in this moment. Don't do like what, you know, don't be consumed in worries or fear about like what other people are thinking about me. And I think we all can get into that a little bit, like worrying too much. And it kind of comes back to what Natalie said, being in a more fearful place, like fearing, instead of just choosing love and just being present and in that moment and just being like, okay, what does he need right now? What do I need? I don't need to shame him or, you know, feel guilty myself. How can we just move forward in a positive way?
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to say about the whole bike riding thing is that what I've noticed is that very often parents will say, be careful, watch out, instead of maybe saying, be aware, look around you, look ahead. Because when that becomes the internal voice of the child, which is be aware, look around you, look ahead, that inevitably makes them much more mindful for their own well-being, as opposed to instilling that fear of be careful, as if there's danger around every bend.
Yeah.
That's funny. I was just
I
saying
hope
that.
that's helpful.
I was just saying that to my nephew, and I felt like it was the wrong thing to say, but I didn't know what else to say. You know, it was like an intuition thing. I was like,
Right.
I don't want to say be careful. That's not what I mean. But it's like be aware. Yeah, exactly. It's like
Right.
be aware there's a stair there, and like you're, you know, banging your head against this thing like you're gonna
Right.
fall over it. Like, but yeah, it was funny because I just had that experience yesterday. I was like, I'm actually at my brother-in-law and sister-in-law's house visiting and seeing them, and so I remember thinking like that's not the right directive, you know.
Right.
But it's just what you hear people say, you know.
Exactly.
So, interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, you know, I know that in Peaceful Mama, the book, you guys do a lot of kind of practical, step-by-step advice, exercises, so to speak. So what do you think is, you know, we always kind of like end the podcast episode with like some practical advice, you know, on the ground. What do you think some really important things for, let's also do preconception, during pregnancy, and motherhood, you know, kind of in those three phases. Like, what do you think are the most important exercises, practices that you would recommend?
Okay. So for preconception, we'll talk like physical, mental, and emotional, I guess. We'll do that for each of them. So for preconception, I think it's really important to make sure that you know exactly what the state of your physical health is. So how are your organs functioning? How's your thyroid? How's your reproductive system? How are all the systems in your body functioning? So whether you go to a functional medicine doctor or an OB or whatever kind of practitioner you decide is best for you, you get an overall status of what your health is like in that moment, your physical health. And then it's important to tap into your emotions. Are you ready emotionally to invite a soul into your existence and to care for somebody else, and to make sure that you're feeling emotionally complete, so that when you do welcome this new baby into your life, you're able to care for the baby in a centered space. Now, regardless of how grounded and centered and, you know, woo-woo you are, when you have a new baby entering your family, there are changes and shifts that will happen, and your hormones will be affected. And so your emotional state will be affected. So the point is that going into that, before you even decide to get pregnant, I think it's necessary to check in with your emotions and make sure that you're as quote unquote stable as possible. So that's physical, emotional, and then the mental well-being, of course, is a very huge part of that as well. So making sure that you are mentally prepared for what is to come. And I think that we, in our book, share a lot of information about how to get centered in each of those different areas, preconception, as well as prenatal and postpartum. So when you are, you know, if you're listening and you are already pregnant and you
Can I ask a
past that
question?
preconception stage, of course.
So for mamas to be, or people who are
Yes.
thinking about wanting to become pregnant, about how far in advance do you guys at least kind of suggest that they really start maybe working with a practitioner, checking on organs, things like that? Is that, do you say like 2 years, 1 year, 6 months? Is there kind of like something to follow around? Okay, I know that maybe within the next 5 years, we want to plan. You know, is there a certain amount of time?
I think that's a really great question, and it is very, the answer is very individual. For some people, when they decide that they are even thinking about it, to them, thinking about it means that they want to start like the next month. And for others of us, we plan in advance. Like I had said to you before, that I stopped taking birth control for a year before we even considered it. So I think the 1 to 2 year would be absolutely incredible. But for those of us that is not probable, and at least 6 months, I think, would be a good time to start prepping your mind, body, and spirit for that idea of having a baby.
That's what I've read.
Does that answer your
I've read
question?
6 months as far as like nutrition wise, physical body stuff, which we're actually going to do on a podcast episode on that all together. So the nutrition preconception. So
Perfect. Yeah. Because there are definitely some, specific herbs and tonics and things that you can start to take to tonify the kidneys and the liver and all of that to make sure that you're in an optimal state.
Well, maybe tell us those, just because I feel like people are going to be like, well, what are they?
Sure. Well, again, it is very dependent on the person. So I don't want people like running out to go get these specific herbs, but things to look into and to consider would be uva ursi is one, chaste berry. So it's CHASTE. There's also red raspberry leaf and let's see, what else would be good? To help your body to detox and release in the most effective way. Dandelion and nettles are really good. I'm a big like tea girl, so I like lots of different herbs. So these are some good ones. If you are in a regular grocery store, most grocery stores have the brand Traditional Medicinals. And I really like that brand. There's no fillers. That's all organic, and the herbs are harvested well. There's also a website called Mountain Rose Herbs, and they have a Facundi tea, and that one's great for pregnancy. And they also have, once you've had your baby, they have a tea that helps to produce milk and things like that. But that website, Mountain Rose Herbs, is a good one to check out. And of course, if you're following us on Peaceful Mamas, we have some tips and stuff on there as well. Awesome. So back to, we were at pregnancy. So during pregnancy, the red raspberry would be great, usually for the second and third trimesters. It's not necessarily something you want during the first trimester. But I think that it's important that for your physical body during pregnancy, that of course you're eating foods that are very nourishing and nutrient dense, as opposed to like just foods that are going to be eaten out of comfort. Although there are times when that is necessary. So no judgments there at all. But I think taking care of your body, so prenatal massages and acupuncture, things like that, are excellent as far as body work goes. And that the body work can affect you physically, emotionally, and mentally. So that's always a plus to incorporate that. Moments of meditation and prenatal yoga, things like that, that are really going to help you reground, recenter, and then feel that immense connection between you and your baby. And then postpartum, that is a time where, unfortunately, we try to rush the healing process. And there's this great song by Trevor Hall that says, "Don't rush your healing." And I feel like it's really applicable in that postpartum stage. Yeah, we're in such a rush to like get back to the gym and to fit in our skinny jeans. I'm not a skinny jeans kind of girl, but some people are, just as an example. We're just in a rush to get back to where we were before, but the truth is that that's in the past and that will never be. So all you can do is accept where you are and know that healing takes time, and it is a tender time. So it's important to make yourself a priority as much as you're making your baby a priority. Lindsay, did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, I think there's 2 practices that I've started that have really helped me tremendously. And those are practices that I wasn't doing when I was, at preconception with my first, but have evolved since I've had my third. And they've really just been these practices that I think could help really anyone at any stage. So the first one is just starting a meditation practice, and knowing, meditation can be on the mat, like maybe that traditional way, but it can also just be taking time for stillness, whether it's in nature or, on a walk, being more mindful in one of your day-to-day activities. So just starting with a couple minutes every day, and just try to take some time for quiet in whatever way, works for you. And, that that can really be fulfilling and helpful throughout all stages. And the second practice I love is, I call it the 3x3x3, but I do it at the end of the day or like before bed, but I think you could do it at any time. So it's taking what you may have heard of, like the gratitude practice, but I do, I write out 3 things I'm grateful for. Can be anything, whatever comes to mind. And then 3 things that I'm thinking about, worrying about. And I kind of like, and I don't write them out even. I do it actually in my phone, just on an app. So just whatever is like comfortable for you. But the practice of just writing that out, the gratitude. And then the second one is my like worries or fears, like getting it out of my head and out into the world. I'm always amazed at how much better I feel about it the next day when it's just not in my head. And I feel like why I feel it's so great at nighttime before bed is because I think our bodies, they work at night while we're sleeping. And sometimes you'll find uncover a solution that you didn't know. So it's gratitude, worry. And then the third thing is like your intentions for the next day. And it could be like what you want to accomplish, like in that lens, or it could just be, how am I going to find, what's one thing I can do tomorrow to find joy? So I think I'm amazed that when I set that intention, energy flows where your intention goes. I love that. And I think sometimes when you just set an intention for even little things like, I'm going to have breakfast, or, whatever it can be, start with 1 or do the 3x3x3. It only takes like 5 minutes. And, those 2 practices of just having some stillness every day, be a meditation, and writing out those things at the end of the day have been really helpful for me. And I think it would help anyone at any stage, and so that's what I would say as well.
Sounds like something I need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good.
Well, amazing, ladies. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. Please let us know, I said about finding the book on Amazon. Is there anything else, any other place you like people to find you or interact with you, or any other offerings that I know you guys have a podcast, Lindsay?
Yeah. So my podcast is Every Day, Every Mom, and we're pretty active on Instagram. We share on there. So at Peaceful Mamas on Instagram, we share, just daily, thoughts and pictures. And we're also coming out with a program. It'll be out in about a month, which is kind of taking the book. And for those that want to kind of delve in a little deeper and have some like accountability with it, we have a private Facebook group, as well as we kind of take you through a 6-week program where we incorporate some meditations and exercises and journal and reflecting. And so it'd be a great way to kind of really, integrate this Peaceful Mama into your world. So you can find out more about that all on Peaceful Mamas.
Okay. Who's the program for? Is it for moms? Is it for people who want to be moms? Is it?
Yeah, anyone. It would be at any stage. It would be really, really great.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. It's about the preconception, prenatal, and postpartum, and that is a span of 15 years. It could be, because whether you're a seasoned mom or you are just contemplating potentially getting pregnant, the tools that we're providing can help you at any stage that can.
Yeah. Great. That's awesome. I really enjoyed the book. For those of you who are thinking about it, I think it's a great book, and it actually makes so much sense that you're doing a program, because when I read the book, it was kind of like, this would be cool to go through with other people, and have that kind of
awesome,
not even like accountability, but just like, because it is so like practice based
connection.
That connection piece for sure, and like community. And so I love it. It makes sense.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you for having us on. It was great to meet both of you.
You too.
You too.